Part 61. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 609. For Subai, his task is very simple: go to the appointment normally, talk normally, know each other normally, distinguish normally, and finally, kill people normally. For Fatty, Jizhen, Monk, and Gyatso, their mission seemed much looser and more casual. The four of them did not make an appointment to ambush near the hotel, and prepared various formations and magic weapons. You 1 and I 2. He's 3 or 4 on the ground. Because this is not an ambush battle. In fact, if there is really an ambush battle, if the opponent is really willing to take the attack, then the 4 people tied together will just stop eating. This is an operation whose main purpose is to find clues. Its spirit is participation is important. The extremely low goal and extremely low success rate also give the 4 monks more room for development. However, maybe the 4 of them plus Subai didn't expect that the other party seemed to have fully calculated this and adopted a preemptive stance. The fat man is still trapped in the hospital by the formation, shouting for the radio, but the radio seems to be not in the service area. Xiezhen is sitting next to Subai's private room, but he is drugged and forced to immerse himself in the illusion. Even though he is far away, Subai is very close, but it can still be said to be a world away. Moreover, both of them were tricked without having time to send any message. However, although neither of them sent a message, the fact that they haven't sent a message for so long is probably the best message. The monk sent several inquiring messages in succession. When he saw that no one in the WeChat group responded except Subai, who replied with a picture, he realized that something was wrong. This problem seemed to have appeared a little early for the monk. At the same time, the monk couldn't help but sigh a little. The 4 people who thought they were in hiding were actually exposed to each other's eyes all the time. But no matter how the situation changed, what should be done was actually still done. Putting the phone away, the monk opened the door to the balcony on the 2nd floor and walked in. This is Aunt Subai's house. The monk is responsible for searching this place. Although that woman once stayed here and lived here, she should not be here now. If she were here, the monk would have to sit on the wax. Yes, sit on wax. The monk was not even mentally prepared. He opened the door and went in. He saw the woman sitting in front of him, looking at him calmly. Even the monk couldn't bear this scene. He faced the statues of gods and Buddhas while praying to Buddha. It gives people endless psychological pressure. Fortunately, that scene did not appear, and there was no one in the whole room. The monk began to check everywhere. Every message and every key point was extremely important as long as he could find it. Unknowingly, the monk came to the wedding room of Subai's cousin and brother-in-law. The monk saw the wedding photo hanging on the wall and the dressing table in front of him. He observed it carefully. The monk also discovered the nail scratches on the dressing table mirror. For a moment, a picture emerged in the monk's mind. In the picture, the woman was sitting here, leaning slightly sideways, unconsciously rubbing one hand on the mirror, and looking at the wedding photos on the wall with her eyes. She watched for a long time. However, what makes the monk a little difficult to understand is that the woman really just unconsciously failed to control her strength, so she left nail scratches on the mirror. How could a woman who was so free and able to avoid the prying eyes of the radio make such a stupid mistake? Based on what Subai told, that brother-in-law is probably the real Subai, the real child of that woman. But that woman. Will your heart suddenly soften and you will be unable to contain your maternal brilliance and stare at your son's wedding photos in a daze? Possible. It's very possible. After all, even if you are a heinous bad guy, you cannot make him think about how to do bad things 24 hours a day. He may also suddenly help an old lady cross the road on a whim. However, the monk felt that a woman like that shouldn't have such emotions. And, in the monk's view, there is actually no essential difference between her attitude towards her biological son and her attitude towards Subai. The monk stared at the mirror, wanting to look carefully, but suddenly, another picture appeared in the monk's mind. In the picture, a woman is standing here, yes, she is standing here. Then she reaches out and gently scratches the mirror with her nails while looking at her skin and hair carefully in the mirror, admiring with your own beauty. Then she turned around and left. In the whole picture, the woman didn't take a second look at the wedding photo. What she purely admired was herself. Because when the monk saw the wedding photo for the first time, he felt that something was wrong. However, the monk did not wake up at first. Now, the monk finally figured out what was wrong. Ordinary people, or newlyweds, will definitely hang a wedding photo in their bedroom, unless something unexpected happens. But where does that sit? The normal choice would be to hang it on the wall above the couple's wedding bed, but the wedding photos in this room are placed on the wall to the right of the entrance, facing the bed, on the dressing table. Diagonally in front, not even in the center of the wall, but close to the door. This is where the monk felt something was wrong when he first came in. Because normal people rarely choose to put their wedding photos in this location. The monk immediately came to the bed and carefully checked the wall above the bed. Suddenly, the monk was stunned because he found an area on the bed that was obviously a little different from the surrounding areas because it had been cleaned, but it was still left. There are some perceptible traces. That painting. It should have been hung here. This painting has been moved. The monk's breath suddenly tightened, and when he turned around, he happened to see the dressing table. The monk's own figure was also reflected in the mirror, but in the mirror, there was a black figure beside the monk. This figure, the monk is very familiar with it, this is his master. Amitabha. The monk put his hands together and meditated. The monk actually knew in his heart that this black shadow did not exist at all. After he personally smashed his master to death with a demon-conquering pestle, and then personally strangled the remaining souls of his master with a cloth. My own master. In fact, it has really completely disappeared from this world. At that time, the Chi-LV had not yet become an audience, but at that time, the Chi-LV had already acquired the Taoism. The death of the master is a kind of sadness, but it is also an inevitable one. He tried to swallow the relics and integrate them into his body, but he went crazy. In the end, he picked his own face and let his flesh and blood roll while begging Kilo to kill him. This was the monk's inner demon, but in the world of the story, the broadcast had set up a dangerous situation for the monk against this inner demon, but the monk had already let go of it at that time. He even vaguely saw his master slowly fading away from his violence. Chi stood in front of him, waving goodbye to him, but at this moment, when the black figure appeared in the mirror again, the monk's heart suddenly started to stir. Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva, walking in the deep Prajnaparamita for a long time, saw that the 5 aggregates are all empty, and survived all the hardships. Relic, color is not different from emptiness, emptiness is not different from color, color is emptiness, emptiness is color. The monk stood beside the bed with his hands clasped together and recited the Prajnaparamita Heart Sutra. Deep in his heart, he seemed to see his master coming back again. But the monk's mind is as strong as iron, and he is ready to directly eliminate the karma that suddenly arises again. However, the black shadow slowly faded away and turned into a peaceful and kind face. The master's face was full of furrows and wrinkles, just like when he held the hand of Chi-LV who was sent to the temple to study. At that time, the master's hands were rough but warm. Alas, Amitabha the master recited the Buddha's name facing the 7 laws. Amitabha Kilu responded with the Buddha's name. Haha, I'm helpless as a teacher, and I've been tossed around again. The master smiled bitterly, just let go of me as a teacher, Chi leave after all, it's better to let go completely than to let go. I'm tired of being a teacher, and I won't have a peaceful death. I have to be pulled out every now and then. It makes me, my precious disciple, so disgusting. I am so ashamed. I shouldn't have been greedy in the first place. I have worked hard to cultivate my state of mind for a lifetime, but it will all be in vain. Chi Lu smiled casually, and the stick killing that he had prepared disappeared. Yes, it's time to let it go. He put his hands together again and said, Master, he's gone. It should have disappeared a long time ago. The master chuckled, and his figure slowly drifted away. From now on, Killa will not remember his master. Everything around has returned to calm. The wedding bed, wedding photos, dressing table, and mirror above. Nothing seemed to have changed, but a whirlpool was dissipated at this moment. The monk first took out his mobile phone and called Subai. Sorry, the number you dialed is not in the service area. Please call again later. The monk squinted his eyes, and there was a hint of depth in his eyes. In the WeChat group, Subai, who was still in contact with him, has also lost contact. In addition, Gyatso and Fatty Siezhen, who had lost contact before, can be imagined that the other party took the initiative in advance. However, the other party committed a crime on his side. Made a mistake, or called a mistake. The monk immediately walked out of the wedding room. He had to rush to the hotel as soon as possible. However, when the monk had just walked into the living room, a clear voice suddenly sounded. The monk slowly turned his head. Behind him, on the sofa in the living room, a black women's dress that was originally scattered there turned out to be, slowly filling up and floating up. Amitba, it turns out it's you. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 610. Whirring. Gyatso walked out of the shower room and wiped the water drops on his body with a bath towel while picking up his phone and checking the WeChat group. 4 people drew lots before, and there were 3 task cards, but one of them contained the word 1, which had an unchanging meaning. The person who got this card had to stay at Lao Fang's house and do nothing. The 4 of them went out together and then fought each other out at the door. However, the 4 of them knew that one of them would definitely be transferred back to Lao Fang's home, but no one knew who it was except that person himself. This is because, at least in the current opinion of the 4 of them, there is no safer place than Lao Fang's house. If something happens to the rest of the people, at least one person can stay in this house while ensuring safety. Go down and take the next action. At least, there won't be the awkward situation of 4 people eating food outside together. This is also a last resort, because to face that woman, you must leave a backup plan in everything. This is probably what a great man said back then, to despise your opponent strategically and value your opponent tactically. In the WeChat group, neither Subai nor the monk, Fatty, or Siezhen continued to speak. Everyone had agreed before that they would send a message to the WeChat group to confirm their status within a certain period of time. It's basically certain now. The monk, the fat man, and Siezhen were all in trouble. As for Subai, he didn't need to be too surprised for the time being. After all, it would be an accident if he didn't have trouble. Gyatso changed his clothes. Now, he alone is a free man, so he must do some things. At this time, Jixiang was lying on the sofa with the little guy watching TV. Gyatso came over, pinched the little guy's tender face, and then walked to the entrance to change his shoes. Shanghai, it was blowing crazy today, and the wind was also mixed with some moisture. It looked like it was going to rain. When Gyatso opened the door and walked outside, he really felt that a mountain rain was coming and the wind filled the building. Means. Dong dong dong. My mother must be here. My cousin stood up and rushed to open the door first. Immediately, Subai saw a handsome-looking young man walking in with his aunt. The man was slightly shorter than Subai, and his figure was a bit thin. He had a scholarly air. At first glance, he was a scientific researcher, with a bit dull and loyal. Here, let me introduce you. Bai Su, this is your cousin. Subai, this is your brother-in-law. Hello, cousin. I often hear my aunt mention you to my baby. The other party extended his hand to Subai politely. Subai also reached out to shake hands with him very calmly. Baisu, when my aunt pronounced it, there was actually no sense of incompatibility, because the word Bai is usually pronounced Bo when used as a surname, so when my aunt just introduced it, she pronounced it Bosu. However, in Subai's opinion, the pronunciation of the other person's name was exactly the same as his own name. The handshakes and pleasantries were carried out very calmly. Baisu was talking about work and life in Japan, and Subai was more of a listener. The couple hadn't been together for a long time, so the cousin seemed more cheerful in this party. The aunt and Subai were sitting on the side, looking at their daughter and son-in-law, with a kind of comfort as elders on their faces. This is a very harmonious scene and a very beautiful picture. The young couple did not have any estrangement due to work in different places. Instead, they felt that a little separation was better than a newlywed. At this time, Subai was also looking at the young couple in front of him and talking as a half-elder, but no one might have thought that deep in Subai's heart, that brother-in-law had actually been marked as a killer by him. Of course, until now, Subai had not found any clues about the label. The other party dealt with it appropriately and did not reveal any flaws. The dishes were also served, and everyone chatted while eating. At this time, Baisu asked Subai, "Cousin, I heard that the Haihua group before the reorganization was actually yours." This was a very common question, but for this reason, my cousin quietly kicked her husband from below, asking for help. Maybe, in the eyes of his cousin and aunt, Subai failed in business, ruined all the property left by his parents, and fell from the peak of his life. It's best not to irritate him at this time. Yes, Subai responded lightly. But I heard one of my classmates say that it was you who took the initiative to deliver the equity. Baisu was obviously very interested in this topic. That's right. Subai picked up the wine glass and gestured to Baisu, "Take a sip." Good. The two clinked their glasses gently, and Subai drank it all in one gulp. Baisu originally just wanted to take a sip, but when he saw that Subai drank it all in one gulp, he had no choice but to drink it. Cough, cough, cough. Obviously, Baisu was not a drinker. He drank the liquor too quickly and coughed immediately. You, my cousin won't blame you if you're not bored." The cousin wiped her husband's clothes with a tissue nearby. Baisu also smiled shyly, "Forget it, I'll go to the bathroom to take care of it." Baisu got up and prepared to go to the bathroom. Subai also straightened his collar at this time and stood up, "It's just right, let's go together." The cousin and aunt stayed in the private room, and Subai and Baisu walked out together. The bathroom is at the far left corner of this floor. Baisu walked in front of Subai. The other party seemed to be waiting for Subai to approach and walk side by side, but Subai still deliberately let himself walk behind. When he was approaching the bathroom, Baisu suddenly accelerated and rushed in. When Subai entered, he saw Baisu holding his hands on the edge of the wash basin and retching into the pool. Subai reached out and patted Baisu's back gently. "If you don't know how to drink, don't force it," Subai comforted. "Next time, don't try too hard." "Thank you, cousin." Baisu turned on the faucet and started gargling. Subai moved the hand sanitizer in front of Baisu. When Baisu stretched out his hand, Subai helped him push out the hand sanitizer. In a daze, Subai felt that the scene was very familiar. Bathroom. Retching. There was a sour smell in the air. Standing behind this person. Subai slowly closed his eyes. In my memory, I should be wearing a sports sweatshirt at that time, standing behind the female white-collar worker, and then pinching her neck familiarly. Baisu's neck was strangled by Subai, and Subai's right arm lay directly across his chest, making him completely lose the chance to resist. Seem. Exactly the same. Just this time. It seems that I can no longer say such words. I don't know if you are guilty or not. I don't even know if you are the person I am looking for. It is very likely that you are still choosing to hide now, so you did not resist. But sorry. This time, I did something different from what I did in the club before. At that time, I could still give myself a skin covered with justice and sanctions, but at this time, all I could do was admit the selfishness in my heart. You come to me, you are dissatisfied with me, you are angry with me, that is right, because you are the real owner of this body. It's just that it's over. Puff. Subai crushed Baisu's neck. At the same time, Subai lowered his head, pierced his fangs into Baisu's flesh, and began to suck the other man's blood crazily. Plain blood, no special taste. But Subai felt a sense of guilt of his own. Soon, Baisu turned into a mummy. When Subai let go, he fell to the ground slumped. Subai approached the sink and rinsed his hands with cold water. At the same time, he picked up a tissue and gently wiped the remaining bloodshot eyes at the corners of his mouth. From all appearances, Baisu is just an ordinary person, but how could there be such a coincidence? Maybe he did it on purpose. Even though I had killed him, I still felt like I had killed the wrong person, so that I had to wake up occasionally, thinking that he might be hiding somewhere and watching me. Guilt, yes. Doubts, yes. But more than anything, it's a sense of relief. Subai put his hand in the hair dryer. When the warm wind blew over his palm, Subai suddenly took out his hand. For some reason, Subai was repelling any feeling of warmth at this time. After sorting out her clothes, Subai walked out of the bathroom. Subai didn't even close the bathroom door. Killing someone now does not have a big impact on Subai. It is not like in the killing club before. Every time he killed someone, there was actually an urgent sense of tension that could make his scalp numb. But for some reason, Subai began to miss the feeling after killing people more and more. Taking a deep breath and letting it out slowly, Subai told himself in his heart that it was over, at least this knot in his mind should be over. As for that woman, where is she and what is she doing? You can leave it alone for now. Pushing open the door of the private room, Subai walked in naturally. When he came in, he found his aunt leaning over the dining table, her breathing steady and her chest rising and falling slowly, as if she was asleep. And his cousin was sitting there playing with her mobile phone. Seeing Subai come in, her cousin stood up and said a little strangely, "Cousin, where is Baisu?" "He's still in the bathroom," Subai explained. When Subai picked up the phone and planned to leave as if something was wrong, he was stunned. Because he saw a meaningful smile appear on the corner of his cousin's mouth. This smile made her look like a completely different person from before. "You killed him, right?" The cousin picked up a glass of wine on the table and drank it, revealing a charming pink color on her cheeks. "You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao. Chapter 611. The wind is getting stronger and stronger. Although it is almost April, the climate at this time still does not seem so friendly. The cold wind passing between the high-rise buildings is mixed with the moist and cold wind, constantly telling people that it has not left yet. The already fast-paced citizens of Magic City couldn't help but take the initiative to increase their speed at this time. Compared with competing against time for work and family, perhaps they are actually less willing to stay outside too much now. The business in the commercial street seems to be a little bleak today. Now, the negative effects of excessive urban development have gradually emerged. Even the magical city with amazing digestion capacity is no exception. In many places, there has also been a downturn in popularity that is inconsistent with expectations. But above this commercial street, there is an atmosphere that is completely different from the desolate one at this time. Subai stretched out his hand and gently wiped his chin. He always felt that there were water stains there that had not been wiped dry, or there were blood stains that had not been wiped dry. However, at this time, Subai seemed more relaxed, not like before. Feeling of hesitation. It's hard on you. Subai said these 4 words. Perhaps, even if Subai is as tough as Subai, after learning about his life experience, he has changed from anger to calmness, but he has also thought many times about what he should say when he really faces the real Subai. What to do? But under this situation, all my previous thoughts felt meaningless. In the end, I just said the words, "I'm sorry for you. Indeed, it's hard on you." There was a hint of self-deprecation on the cousin's face, and she slowly put the wine glass down, pointed at her face, and said, "Are you pitying me?" Subai nodded without any pretense, but this gesture was even more hurtful. Because judging from the behavior and attitude of the person in front of him last time in Sichuan, his anger and dissatisfaction had actually approached a critical point. But even though he knew that his posture and movements would stimulate him even more, Subai still did it. Now, there is no point in being perfunctory and giving in. "I pity you, you have suffered a lot, but I still want to kill you. Between you and me, only one can survive. This is doomed. Those 2 photos mark a cutting and separation of your and my destiny. Each of us goes to a fork in the road, but those 2 photos are equally doomed. Between you and me, if nothing unexpected happens, the fateful trajectories will eventually merge together. When the time comes, life and death will definitely have to be separated again. The only variable here may be that Lizzie asked Jixiang to come to him and prevented Brother Ju from opening the bronze box in front of him, or Brother Ju himself broke his original promise and finally decided not to participate in this. Something happened, so 9th brother died and was killed in the nursing home. And it was obvious that the murderer of Brother 9th was the man in front of him. "I'm very jealous of you, very, very jealous of you." The cousin looked at Subai with cold eyes. "You haven't experienced the loneliness and torture of being sealed in that box for so many years. How could I not completely go crazy and lose consciousness? I can actually continue to maintain my own state. I somewhat admire myself. Then, I became a woman, and living in the world as a woman was a more terrifying torture than being sealed in a bronze box. A man was first sealed in a box for many years, and then he didn't know why he could only enter this woman's body to become a woman. If he really had that tendency, this might be a happy outcome for everyone, but it was very difficult. Obviously, he is very straight, so for him, this is a kind of torture that is no less than or even far greater than the previous tight confinement." Subai was a little surprised. No wonder the other party couldn't help but take action against him in Sichuan. That action, which seemed so childish and ridiculous, was just a way to vent his temper, but the reason actually came from here. If the other party enters a man's body, maybe there will be a certain touch, a certain relief, and at a certain point in time, the other party may be a little touched, and it is not impossible for the other party to choose to let go or feel a little relieved at that time. At least, there should be a certain probability that he would slowly learn to look down on one thing, but he entered the body of a woman and had to live like a woman every day, and even had a husband. She had to bear the demands her husband made on her on their wedding night. Subai thought to himself that if it were him, he would have gone crazy. "She is your cousin," Subai said seriously. "She and I have no real blood relationship, but you do." Blood relationship? The cousin seemed to be suppressing a smile, but the anger in her eyes kept brewing at this time. "It's just a similarity in DNA, no different from ordinary people." After chatting for a short time, Subai knew that there was nothing more to talk about, so he just pointed at his aunt who was sleeping there. "Does she know? When you killed her son-in-law, why didn't you ask?" My cousin asked. "That's why you just asked me about blood relations. You and I are the same, we are both very selfish and cold-blooded people. We can enjoy the care and touch from our relatives and friends, but we are stingy in giving the slightest initiative. So, Where are you now? Subai looked around. If that woman is not here, I don't think you should have the confidence to appear in front of me. If that woman is here, I don't think she will have the courage to attack me directly. To tell you the truth, although I feel a little sympathy for you actually entering a woman's body, I am also a little relieved, because I felt that what you did to me in Sichuan made Xiajiaza so angry that I couldn't be more angry. At that time, I feel like you are acting like a little woman and losing your temper. Now I understand, you have entered a woman's body. I don't know why you still have to actively live according to the identity of this woman, and you even don't hesitate to do that kind of thing with a man, but I feel that no matter how are you artificial? In fact, you have been constantly assuming the role and perspective of women. Even still enjoying it? Right? Subai's words were like the last fire that lit the straw, and gasoline had obviously been poured on the straw. Actually, she didn't come back at all. My cousin calmly pointed to my aunt who was unconscious on the sofa and said, "It's actually a very simple thing to fool an ordinary person. But if you want to fool an ordinary person, it's also very simple for you. I'm not afraid of you investigating whether anyone else thinks she came back to life. On the one hand, you are probably too lazy to investigate. On the other hand, even if you investigate, you may think that some rules may have just changed her. Just the thoughts and opinions of people who have been in contact with it. All this is just because the fear of her from the depths of your soul is really very heavy. When you found out that she might come back, you were completely panicked. She is your mother," Subai said. "I noticed that you are unwilling to mention the radio, but you should be aware of its existence." "Oh yes, she is my mother." "Ha ha ha, but I don't agree." "What do you mean by broadcast just now, a radio station or a nightly storytelling station?" I understand. A look of understanding appeared on Subai's face. "I really understand. As long as I am alive for one day, you cannot go beyond the rules. You must continue to live a normal life as expected. Get used to living. If I live one day, you have to be a woman for one day. But I'm curious, what means do you want to use against me? In front of me, your absolute power should have reached the upper limit that ordinary humans can achieve, which is similar to Zhangtianji. But after all, you have not experienced real strengthening. In front of me, you are indeed far behind." "Yes, this is a fact," my cousin admitted decisively. "I am not your opponent, because your progress makes me even feel a sense of despair, and all this is actually the fault of ninth brother. I don't know why. He had no travel arrangements, otherwise there wouldn't be so many things happening today. But fortunately, that bronze box is still in my hand, and you, the person I just killed, will become your reminder. That bronze box connects the fate between you and me, and is also the end between you and me. This is my only chance. Maybe, you may die in the future, but I don't want to wait any longer. 1 year? 2 years? 3 years? 5 years? All this is because you didn't die very early." My cousin's expression began to turn vicious, showing a state of hysteria. "This is my only chance. The room upstairs is a guest room. In the closet of the guest room, there is a bronze box. At this time, several prearranged lines begin to bloom and connect all the way. And this pattern, which was originally inconspicuous, covered the entire hotel. For a moment, the entire hotel was like a formation, being activated. Every day I would pick off a piece of his hair, soak it with my blood, and then put it into a bronze box. In fact, my husband had already been refined into the spirit of the bronze box by me. You just killed him. His dead soul will naturally come to ask for your life. Normally, you wouldn't care about this. However, at this moment, with the blessing of my formation, he will turn into the most terrifying intermediary spirit and destroy your soul. Forcibly pulled back into the bronze box. Your body. Oh no. My body will belong to me again, and your identity and that thing's recognition of you will also be erased. In its recognition, you will have died, and I will have everything about you, but not trapped. Although my absolute strength is not as strong as yours, or even far worse than yours. However, I have been studying these methods such as formations and illusions during those years in the bronze box. That is the inheritance left to me by my parents to relieve my boredom in the box and not go crazy. Oh. For a time, the entire hotel was filled with gloomy wind. Sudbai, on the other hand, was a little dazed. He was wondering. That woman. Really not back. Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao. Chapter 612. Did she really not come back? Sudbai was still thinking about this problem in his mind, as if he didn't care at all about what was happening around him. This expression seemed a little confusing in his cousin's eyes, but he still continued to execute it firmly. Take back your body today, and the result of everything will be today. In short, you will get a result for yourself. Sudbai shook his head slightly and said to himself, she should be back. The surrounding air began to get colder and colder, but it was only limited to this private room. The rest of the place remained as usual. This private room was the location of the formation's eye. Dong dong dong. There was a knock on the door, and at the same time, black thread seeped through the gaps in the private room door and wrapped around Sudbai's body. Sudbai couldn't even break away from them, because these black threads were completely compatible with his soul. In fact, Sudbai knew that his soul must have been bound to the bronze box. Myself and the person in front of me. Their fates, and their souls were all deeply imprinted on that bronze box. It is a knot that cannot be untied, a connection that has been tied since you were born. Sudbai's body floated slowly, as if being lifted up. The bronze box slowly opened at this time. Although there was a long distance, Sudbai could still feel the call from the underworld. And involvement. As if. That is your true destination and your true destination. This is a call that transcends the boundaries of strength, a call that transcends any vague energy concepts such as formations, barriers, etc., as if you belong there, and there is simply no way you can refuse. To be honest, even Sudbai did not expect that the other party would have such great perseverance to paint the entire hotel with formation patterns just to wait for this day. Now, if Sudbai asks himself, he actually came to the appointment with the mentality of going to the hangmen banquet, but this is indeed a very irresponsible attitude towards himself. In history, there are stories like the hangmen banquet, but they are very few. Why is this like this? Because most of the protagonists who go to the hangmen banquet are not as lucky as Pei Gong, and paired with an opponent like Xiang Yu who thinks highly of himself but is stubborn and arrogant, maybe more than 99% of the hangmen banquet ends with the host. The guest threw the cup to the ground. The axemen who were lying in ambush behind the curtains rushed in and chopped the guest to pieces. But even so, neither the fat man nor the monk, nor Gyatso and Xiezhen, they came to dissuade Sudbai. Of course, there must be their eagerness to get involved with that woman, but the biggest reason or because they knew they couldn't persuade Sudbai. Sudbai is not a person who muddles along, nor is he a person who makes choices based entirely on profit trends. Sometimes the fat man will lament why Sudbai often seeks death but can still continue to live, whether in the real world or the story world. Inside. Therefore, when Sudbai had already said that he had agreed to go to this hotel for dinner, the other four people decisively did not continue to dissuade him. At that time, unless the four of them worked together to subdue Sudbai, he would not let him go. Fatty used Lao Fang's formation to suppress Sudbai, and then fed him water and food until Sudbai could regain his freedom the next time he was summoned into the story world by radio. This choice was naturally ridiculous. This is a gathering where Sudbai explains his life, his birth, and the meaning of his existence. How pitiful would it be if a person couldn't even understand the meaning of his existence while alive? The reality has actually made Sudbai very pitiful. Although Subai has relied on his perverted mentality like a mental patient to survive, it doesn't seem to be a big deal. After the initial manic period, he also regained his composure. Do whatever you need to do real tasks when you need to do them, and enter the story world when you need to do it, but Fatty and the others can't stop Subai from finishing it off for himself. The temperature around her has dropped to an extremely exaggerated level. There are ice shards hanging on the surrounding walls, and there is also a layer of hoarfrost on the ground. My aunt is still in a coma, and she obviously won't wake up for the time being, but she can feel it. Cold, the body began to twitch. My aunt was only wearing a formal dress today. Such a thin piece of clothing, and her soul was forcibly locked up in such a thin piece of clothing, she was likely to freeze to death. At least, you didn't have to kill her. Although Subai couldn't move his whole body, he still looked calmly in the direction of his aunt. As far as she is concerned, whether it is you as my cousin or me as Subai, she will give you sincere love and care like an elder. She is a kind woman. There was a cold and fanatical look on the cousin's face. This was a very different and even conflicting expression, but it looked very harmonious and natural on the cousin's face. Fanaticism. It was because he was finally able to accomplish what he had always wanted to do. In that bronze box, the terrible loneliness and boring learning and inheritance he endured, and all the torture, could finally come to an end immediately, and the coldness was because of his cousin's deep hatred for Subai and Subai's unreserved humiliation and ridicule before. His hatred for Subai almost boiled over. At this point, are you still here pretending to be a good person? At this time, Bai Su, whose body was floating in the air, knocked on the door and slowly floated in. He was a soul, but he could feel the ghostly aura on his body. If the bronze box was hell, then this Bai Su, who was refined into a spiritual spirit by his cousin over time without his knowledge, is the black and white impermanence in hell. Because it was Subai who killed him, after turning into a ghost, his hatred naturally focused on Subai. If it were normal, an ordinary person killed by him would become a ghost with a small probability. Ghost, Subai didn't even bother to look at it. Ordinary lonely wild ghosts dared to get close to Subai. As long as the zombie evil energy on Subai's body was automatically activated by the slightest induction, the ghost would immediately disperse. But at this time, Bai Su represents the call from the bronze box. He is coming to take Subai back to the bronze box. Of course, what he takes away is Subai's soul. At this time, the chill here was naturally caused by the terrifying ghost energy on Bai Su's body. You are a selfish person and a hypocritical person. You know, the evil of hypocrisy makes me sicker than the heinous crimes. The cousin pointed at Subai with a ferocious face and said. He did not dare to touch Subai at this time. Because although Subai could not move at this time, if he touched Subai at this time, he would probably be taken back to the bronze box by Bai Su. That picture is so beautiful. Hello brothers. You two are really good friends through and through. Because my cousin, who had stayed in the bronze box for a long time, knew that his parents left almost complete imprints of his and Subai's lives in the bronze box, as well as various restrictions that even he could not explain. To Subai, he is like Sun Wukong's tightening curse. No matter how powerful and terrifying the former is, he will still eat you to death. I have always admitted that I am a selfish person because I can face my heart. Subai looked at her aunt, whose face had turned sickly white, with a hint of unbearability in her eyes. After today, she would lose her relatives, no, she would even lose her own life. Take him away, I can't wait to return to my own body, my long-lost body, the cousin shouted to Bai Su on the side. Bai Su put his hands on Subai's shoulders. Soon, he would take Subai out of the room and return to the bronze box upstairs. However, Subai's face remained so calm until now. It was so calm that my cousin felt a little unreal, but she firmly believed that she had no loopholes or flaws at all. The other party must die. Alas, Subai sighed. he was feeling his soul being slowly and passively extracted from his body. He was powerless to resist, really powerless to resist. You know, I actually feel pity for you, because you said before that after you have my body, you can have my power and live freely, ha ha ha. Subai laughed. Half of his soul had left his body. At this time, Subai's mouth had stopped moving, and his speaking voice had changed from speaking with his mouth to speaking with the vibration of his soul. You know about the existence of radio, but you dare not say it, but I can tell you, when you feel that you can take my body and take over my identity freely. Maybe the broadcaster is watching you as if you are a retard. Even your parents can only hide under the gaze of the broadcaster. What qualifications and confidence do you have to say something freely? This is not something you need to worry about. Goodbye. The cousin looked coldly at Subai's soul that was slowly drifting. Subai's soul was also very calm at this time. When the soul was about to completely leave the body, Subai said in surprise as if he suddenly remembered something. Oh, I forgot to tell you one thing. You are right. I may really be a hypocritical evil person and a hypocrite, because in the bathroom before, I did not kill Baisu in the end, but turned him into a became my first hug. So, Baisu, wake up. At this time, on the cold floor of the bathroom, on this floor, a drop of blood placed on the forehead of the mummy slowly blended into the tight skin of the mummy. Immediately afterwards, the body of the mummy began to gradually become fuller. Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 613. The mummy is slowly filling up, and the chapped skin is slowly returning to its roundness. The skin is even better than before. Vomit. In the bathroom, Baisu opened his mouth and started retching against the floor tiles. Just now, his body had regained its vitality. Even now, he felt that he was more powerful now than before, regardless of his own body. Both his hearing and his vision are much clearer and clearer than before. This is a very strange feeling. The world has become more sophisticated at this time, but it seems that this change is too fast and too sudden, which makes Baisu somewhat unable to accept it. Some psychological factors and some have not been completely transformed. Physical factors made it difficult for him to adapt at this time, so he had a certain rejection reaction. However, this rejection reaction was insignificant. Normally, he would be able to fully adapt to it in a few days. When Baisu stood up slowly, he saw himself in the mirror, his eyes were red, and he was stunned. The soul that was originally pulling on Baisu slowly dissipated at this time, because Baisu came back to life, and his hatred for Subai naturally disappeared. Any normal person, when he suddenly has a long lifespan and an ageless appearance, the first time, it must be ecstasy. As for the human beings who have lived for a long time in TV series and other works of art and feel that it is a very painful thing, it may be true, but in the eyes of most people, it is just an exaggerated expression of art. In fact, in reality, most people cannot resist the temptation of being their first lover by a real vampire. Where did Subai's soul come out and return to? Immediately, Subai, who had automatically fallen into a dormant state or a vegetative state as his soul left, slowly opened his eyes, and the corners of his mouth curved just right. Ridicule. This is mockery. There is no pretense or disguised ridicule. Well. Subai stretched out and regained control over his body. It felt really good. Moreover, the strengthening of this body was the result of Subai's hard work. In Subai's opinion, this was my body, as for the body I had when I was 7 years old, and the body I have now, even if I try to verify the DNA now, they are completely unrelated results, because the bloodline has already undergone great changes. Therefore, it is impossible for Subai to give up this body and return it to the original owner. For Subai, there is no need to consider it at all. Why didn't you kill him? How could you not kill him? Ha Subai smiled, pointed at his face, and said calmly, you know, I used to hate that thing because it played with me, ravaged me, and tortured me, but I also admit that, even I might be suffering from Stockholm Syndrome at this point. Because now I suddenly feel like it is standing behind me. Really good. Why didn't you kill him? The cousin took a step back subconsciously. She began to take the initiative to get closer to the sleeping ant, but the next moment, he did not dare to move at all, because Subai's energy was completely locked. Got him. Even my cousin believed in her heart that as long as she dared to take another step, the other party would come up and tear her to pieces. I think it's pointless to argue about whether to kill him or not. Subai walked to the dining table, picked up the liquor that belonged to him, and placed his palm on his aunt. A soft force followed Subai. Bai's palm began to inject into his aunt's body. To be honest, my aunt's current physical condition is very bad, and Subai himself is really not good at treatment. After trying to dilute the heat of the black dragon scales in his body to his aunt, Subai decisively stopped after a while, because Subai wasn't sure if her aunt's body would have any major problems after it suddenly suffered from the different attacks of cold and heat. However, although my aunt was frozen, the problem should not be serious. At most, she would be seriously ill after waking up, which would not be life-threatening. If she takes good care of herself afterwards, there should not be any root causes of the disease. The most important thing is that if Subai uses his own power to interfere too much, and interferes too much consciously, he is worried that his aunt will also be pulled into the story world, and when a person with a personality like Aunt enters the story world, the ending is to die miserably in fear, which is not what Subai wants to see. Say, why don't you kill him? His cousin still didn't move. He knew that he had failed, and he also knew that his end was doomed, because both he and Subai knew that there must be only one person who could survive in this private room today. I won't let another person go. Now, when he asked this, it was actually more like answering his last question before his death. Subai reached out and took out a pack of cigarettes from his pocket, took out one, bit it in his mouth, lit it with a lighter, slowly inhaled it, and then slowly blew out the smoke ring. Shake out the ashes. Road. Do you believe it? When I tightened his neck. Subai made this gesture with both hands. I hesitated in my heart, because he didn't resist, not at all. No, to be precise, he was resisting, but the intensity of this resistance made me feel that it was almost negligible, so in my opinion, he didn't resist at all. But you should kill him too, the cousin roared. Yes, I should indeed kill him, but you said I was a hypocrite. Haha, I admit, I was. At that time, in my heart, I should kill him no matter what his identity was. But my brain suddenly went crazy at that time. I suddenly felt that he was actually very pitiful. No, he here should refer to you. You were actually very pitiful, so I felt that when I could kill you so easily, I felt a little unable to kill you. I suddenly felt that letting you be my first hug and living a long life together is also, how to describe it, a very beautiful thing. A long life, and even longer torture. The cousin looked at Subai angrily. This is your mentality. When you think you can kill me easily, your choice is even more humiliating for me. It's even more of a torture method instead of killing me. Oh, that's it. Subai showed the original look on his face. Yes, you understand me very well. There is one thing you need to be clear about. I can understand your hatred for me, but please believe it. My hatred for you and my hatred for your parents are the same. As soon as he finished speaking, Subai's figure disappeared on the spot. The next moment, he appeared in front of his cousin. He grabbed his cousin's neck with one hand and lifted her up. Furthermore, there is one thing that I think I should tell you again, because you didn't understand or realize this at all before. If your parents were here in person to handle this matter this time, then there might still be a slight chance of success. And you? What did you say just now when it seemed like my soul was about to be dragged into a bronze box? You want to own my body, my identity, and something called freedom. Haha, when you said this, I actually wasn't worried at all in my heart. I really wasn't worried at all. Even if I didn't give Baisu his first hug, even if I cut him into pieces in the bathroom, even if I trampled him to pieces, even if I tied my own hands and kneeled down in front of you today, crying and shouting, "Give your body back." Likewise, various accidents will occur, causing all your plans to fail. Well, by the way, do you still want to take a cigarette? The cousin said nothing, still staring at Subai. Well, you are quite stupid. You have been in a box for so many years and in a woman's body for 2 years. Although you know about that kind of thing, you don't know anything about that thing called broadcasting. How terrible it is. Black dragon scales covered Sudbai's palms, and the cousin's body was forcibly melted by Sudbai amidst the screams. Little by little, it evaporated completely, leaving not even a trace of bone residue. Crushing bones and scattering ashes is nothing more than that. Squeak. The door of the private room was pushed open, and Baisu appeared at the door. He looked at Sudbai, and there were countless voices in his heart urging him to kneel down to Sudbai. This is the surrender from the first embrace to the owner, a kind from the blood of surrender. Plop sound. Baisu knelt down to Sudbai. Owner. This shout of master was very respectful. Although there was a lot of incomprehension and a lot of doubts, at this time, Baisu had no way to make other choices. Everything was completely controlled by instinct. Sudbai looked at his aunt who was still unconscious, and then at Baisu who was kneeling in front of him. He walked up to Baisu. Baisu pressed his forehead against the ground, showing his complete surrender to Sudbai. Since you are not him, Sudbai pursed her lips and continued, my aunt has already lost a daughter, so this son-in-law has no meaning in his existence. Snapped. Sudbai raised his feet and then dropped them simply. Baisu's head, which was lying on the ground, was directly crushed by Sudbai's kick. Quickly, contact Sudbai. With Gyatso's support, the monk finally broke free from the house and pointed at Gyatso and shouted these words as soon as he came out. I can't contact him now, and there's no signal on his cell phone. Gyatso rarely saw the monk looking so flustered and nervous. Find him quickly, must find him, I saw that woman inside, the true identity of that woman, go to the hotel, now, immediately, go to the hotel immediately. That woman, is. Today, Long plans to adjust his jet lag, because the time difference between his work and rest has been completely reversed, and his body is also very sluggish. He has not slept until now during the day, and plans to wait until evening to go to bed and sort out his schedule. This is the second update today, and there will be no sleep at night. Then, stopping here, Long knew that he would definitely be scolded by everyone for breaking the chapter. To be honest, everyone was chasing him here. There was no need for Long to break the chapter to whet everyone's appetite. But at the end of this chapter, if he directly said that woman, whoever it is destroying the structure of this chapter and the content rhythm of the next chapter, making it impossible to write the next chapter. Let's do this. If you search for Kongbu66 on So Long's public WeChat ID and it turns out that the user does not exist, just click on the search column below and it will appear. Then check out Long's latest graphic news, and Long will immediately publish the answer. To his heart, Long is really afraid that after a night of sleep, he will wake up and the book review area will be filled with out of context and unscrupulous comments. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao Long. Chapter 614. In the private room, there were delicious dishes, which were basically untouched. However, the 4 people who were supposed to be sitting at the dining table enjoying the food happily, One was in a coma and had been smelted to the bone, and the other one had his brains splattered and stained. One place. Bai Su was just a low-level first supporter. If Subai stepped on him, he would die solidly. Moreover, Subai had no intention of leaving any room for him. Turning around, Subai picked up the unconscious ant and jumped directly from the window. Below, there is an open-air parking lot with many cars but not many people. Even the security guard of the parking lot is just sitting with his legs crossed in the pavilion at the front entrance, bragging and talking, so Subai just jumps in. The move of coming down was not noticed by anyone. Subai was looking for the fat man's Audi car, but suddenly he remembered that he had asked a waiter to park the car for him before, but the waiter had not returned the car key to him. Coincidentally, a man in a suit walked to a car next to Subai, took out the key, pressed it, and then opened the door. Subai walked over directly. The other party thought that Subai was holding a girl and was preparing to go out for fun. When he got closer, he found that the girl was not young, but she was at the age of a woman. Then, the man glanced at Subai with a look that said, "It's okay for you." However, when he was about to get into the car, Subai stretched out one of his hands and hit the other person on the back of the head. The other person was immediately knocked unconscious and fell outside the car door. After putting her aunt in the back seat, Subai sat in the driving position and started the car. Subai drove smoothly along the way. He planned to take his aunt to the hospital, and he did not plan to go to a fat man or a monk who could heal people. Their treatment methods were only suitable for audiences and ordinary people. Unless there was a justifiable reason, they would probably cause harm. That person. On the way, Subai took out a cigarette and bit it in his mouth, but when he saw his aunt lying there in the rearview mirror, Subai just continued to bite the cigarette without lighting it. It was quite far from the nearby hospital. Subai didn't drive very fast and didn't even choose to take the elevated road. When the car stopped at a traffic light intersection, the aunt lying in the back slowly woke up. She held her forehead with her hand, and there was a trace of panic in her eyes. When she saw Subai sitting in the driving seat and driving the car, the panic in his eyes disappeared. "What's wrong with me?" my aunt asked doubtfully. "I drank too much, and my pieces broke," Subai said with a smile. "Oh, really?" my aunt could only believe it. "Then where are you going now?" "Go to the hospital and get some water." "Isn't it necessary?" "Yes, you have fallen asleep just now. You should go to the hospital for a checkup before I feel relieved." "Where are Baisu and the others?" my aunt asked. "Baisu also drank too much. My cousin will send him home to rest first." "I will send you to the hospital first. Then I'm fine. I just feel a little dizzy now." "Please stop the car. I want to get down and take a walk," the aunt said. "Good." Subai didn't insist and stopped the car directly on the side of the road. Subai got out of the car first, and then helped his aunt get out of the car. Auntie is not that old yet, although the aunt said so. She still let Subai help her get out of the car. After getting out of the car, Subai continued to help her move forward. The aunt didn't refuse, so Subai kept supporting her. "Wind. It's a bit big, and it lifts up my aunt's skirt from time to time." "It's a bit cold," Subai reminded. "Fine." One of the aunt's hands continued to be supported by Subai, and the two of them walked straight to the overpass in front. Climbing up the stairs, step by step, very slowly, very slowly. The aunt looked at Subai and said, "Every time I see you, I always feel that you have grown up a lot." "That's because we don't see him often," Subai said with a smile. "Yes, I don't see you often. It's true that you don't come to see me often. I can't find you even if I want to find you personally. I have to rely on your cousin to meet you by chance, otherwise based on your temperament he will never take the initiative to contact our two mothers again. You say, what can compare to blood and family ties? Don't worry, Auntie, even if my cousin didn't meet me by chance last time, I would have come to find you, for sure. That's good, the ant patted Sudbai's hand gently. Keep your word. Keep your word, Sudbai nodded. The ant's body was still a little weak. When the two of them walked to the pedestrian bridge together, the ant stopped and signaled that she needed to take a rest. Sudbai stood next to her ant, and they faced the traffic ahead. Cars passed under the Uran bridge at high speed, and the sound of horns was heard endlessly. The noise of the city had the most intuitive expression here. You said, how wonderful it would be if people could live forever. My aunt stretched out her hand to straighten the hair around her temples, and suddenly sighed. It doesn't seem to mean much if you live for too long. If you go through a lot of troubles in your life, you have passed it. Has it been a struggle? The ant repeated Sudbai's words. Ha, yes, a person's life is just a struggle, and in the end, the struggle may be in vain. The most important thing is to enjoy the process, Sudbai said. Enjoy the process, my aunt shook her head and said with a smile, it's like an athlete's competition. Although the slogan of participating is always on the lips, what can be remembered is the gold medal. But there is only one gold medal. When an 8 or 9-year-old child is sent to a sports school for special training, who can guarantee that the only gold medal will definitely be worn on her chest in the future? Your idea is too negative. When you actually do something, you will know that there will never be a way back. You can only bite the bullet and move forward. As long as there is a road ahead, you have to keep going. Go on, go on. Go on, go on. No matter how narrow or short the road ahead is, you have to force yourself to either turn sideways or squat down. In short, you can't stop, and there is no way to stop. Because one step of hesitation and one step back may lead to an abyss. Haha, my aunt is right about what she said lyrically. It's a pity that my nephew doesn't have much money at the moment. Otherwise, I could help my aunt publish a collection of essays, which will definitely sell well by then. You're teasing your aunt again. My aunt seemed to have had enough rest and continued walking along the railing of the overpass, with Sudbai slowly following behind. I've heard a lot about you. How can you just say you don't want such a big family business? The elders on both sides of the family said that it was you who lost such a big family business, but my aunt, I know that you took the initiative to throw such a large group out. I didn't earn it myself. If I use it, I'll prick my hands, Sudbai explained. Your parents' money is your money, the aunt emphasized. Haha, after being a rich second generation for so many years, I am content, right? I am still young, so I have to have some young ideas. Just like those young writers in the past who liked to be unemployed and independent, I also want to do something. Come out. The loss of such a large group is the result of your hard work. I have enough to eat by myself now. Haha, no, Auntie, I forgot to tell you that I actually have a son. I don't make much money now, but at least we, father and son, can't go hungry. I didn't expect that you already have a son. My aunt covered her mouth and smiled. Bring it to me another day. Those are also my grandchildren. Children are very naughty, so I won't disturb your peace, Sudbai said. Auntie, I have nothing to do anyway, so I won't bother you. It's okay. In the future, when the time is right, I will take the child to see my aunt and let her see how I take care of, my son. Sudbai said seriously. Okay, Aunt, I'll wait for that day. Auntie, have you ever thought that the results of some things are destined, just like a tunnel? Sudbai suddenly asked. It will give you a lot of room and hope for progress, but when you reach when you are about to go out to see the light, you see the last wall completely blocking your way, and on the wall, there is a clown's smiling face painted. What do you think? Auntie looked at Sudbai. Do you think it's better to have this wall or not? I don't care. Sudbai shrugged and licked his lips. I hope there is a wall to block them, and then when I walk there, I will find a clown's face on the wall, and the paint was painted with their blood. It's a very grey metaphor, my aunt sighed. The gloomy sky slowly began to rain at this time. This rain seemed to come at the right time and fit the atmosphere. Of course, it was not surprising at all, because today was originally a cloudy day. The ant held onto the railing and walked down step by step. Subai stood at the top of the stairs. He did not continue to support her, but stayed there quietly, watching the ant's figure slowly merge into the crowd. Among. Soon. Just like a drop of water falling into the sea, it can't make any waves. At this time, Subai's cell phone rang. After picking up the phone, the monk's urgent voice sounded on the other end. Subai, your phone has been unreachable just now. The poor monk and the fat man are now in the hotel. We found the bronze box, but it has been completely scrapped. And, your aunt, she should be the one who came back. Woman. Oh. Subai responded, then cut off the phone, holding the cigarette in his mouth while driving. Currently. Ready to order. Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao. Chapter 615. Subai drove the car of the person he knocked unconscious and first came to his aunt's house. On the way, Subai sent the fat man a WeChat message and told him that his Audi car was still parked in the parking lot of the hotel. He drove back by himself. Subai just came to my aunt's house a while ago, and the monk and Gyatso also came. The house is a small villa with its own parking space, and the surrounding greenery is also very good. It is considered a high-end residential area. Although my aunt is a widow and has retired, she has many shares in other companies, so she has, aunt and cousin, they don't need to worry about their livelihood at all. After all, my aunt, like my cheap mother, is the daughter of an official. She has also been in politics for a period of time. Basically, when other juniors in the family start a business, they will allocate part of the profits to dry stocks in order to obtain the real core of the family. The support of members is a natural habit and unspoken rule. If it weren't for my cheap mother who became the audience and took a completely different path from ordinary people, maybe, if she were an ordinary person, that woman would probably be sitting here now, holding a book in her hand and beside her put a cup of tea and live the life of a noble lady leisurely. And she and her so-called husband are also the standard marriage between two aristocratic families in the eyes of the world. Even if they don't really love each other, they are at least rich and powerful people. For a moment, Subai seemed a little dazed. If there was no broadcast, everything should develop like this. But soon, Subai closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and then slowly exhaled it. Turning around, he sat down on the steps in front of the villa door. On Subai's left-hand side was a fish pond. The other surrounding villas all came with a fish pond as standard, but my aunt's house was converted into a fish pond by herself. Subai still remembered that although he didn't have much contact with his aunt in the past, she used to be very imposing. However, after her uncle passed away due to illness, she also went through the formalities of early retirement and could be a leisurely woman with peace of mind. And this pond is a good proof. Raising his head, Subai gritted his teeth. He didn't enter the house, and there was really no need to enter the house again, because the person he was waiting for would come back on his own, but she is your biological sister. You don't need to be so cruel. You won't be so cruel either, Subai said to himself. I am not your child. You can do whatever you want with me and experiment on me. But that is your biological sister. You will keep her alive, right? After you have used up her body. Situation. A taxi drove here, and Subai stood up slowly. He saw his aunt get out of the taxi, took out money from her bag and paid the fare. After the taxi left, her aunt took the initiative to ask Subai come this way. She walked very naturally, she walked very normally. No matter the gaze. Whether it is action. In short, it's all normal. However, Subai's breathing became heavier and heavier at this time, because he discovered that the woman in front of him only had a skin, and even the skin was gone soon. At this time, she was just a wind-up toy, executing one person's last instructions, and that person was her biological sister. The ant smiled and walked straight past Subai. But he ignored Subai and opened the door directly and walked into the living room from the entrance. Subai turned around and walked in together. The living room was a mess. It was obvious that the monk had encountered a lot of trouble here before, but the ant still didn't see anything and went straight into her bedroom. Subai also walked into her aunt's bedroom. He saw his aunt slowly sitting in front of the dressing table applying makeup. The light makeup made her already very temperamental and more beautiful. Then, the aunt walked to the bed, placed the photo of herself, her deceased husband, and their young daughter on the bedside table on her chest, and lay flat on the bed. Immediately afterwards, my aunt's body began to rot, exuding a foul smell, and flesh maggots were climbing back and forth on her body, going in and out. Subai slowly clenched his fists. Although Subai's eyes were red at this time, there was still a smile on the corner of Subai's mouth, but this smile looked very sinister. You will end up exactly the same as your son. Subai raised his head. When ordinary people point to the sky, most of them mean God, and there are gods 3 feet above their heads. But when listeners point to the sky, they mostly mean the radio, because in the eyes of the listeners, the radio is bigger than the sky. Broadcasting, you must not let me down. When Subai returned to Lao Fang's house, the fat monk and Gyatso were enjoying the vegetarian meal. The monk was not only good at making tea, but also had an absolutely first-class skill in making vegetarian food. The little guy was holding his own milk, sucking it and watching TV. Ji Xiang was crawling beside the little guy. Dabai, you eat, damn it, what's the smell on you? Go and wash up. Go and wash up. You won't let anyone eat? Subai's body smelled like corpse, and the fat man could naturally smell it. Subai nodded, and the little guy didn't mind at all and staggered towards Subai for a hug as usual. Hey, little ancestor, you are so fragrant and tender, why don't you let your dad take a bath first and then play with you? The fat man took the little guy away. Subai entered the bathroom and washed it 4 times with shower gel and shampoo. The smell on his body was completely removed. When he walked out wearing a bath towel, the monk and the others had already finished eating, but he left a portion for Subai on the coffee table. Subai was not polite, sat down on the sofa, picked up the bowls and chopsticks and started eating. Damn, I knew you were an animal. Your mental quality is simply abnormal. By the way, Xie has already gone back. We were so busy that he slept for a long time, right next door to you. The fat man sat down. Next to him, he lit a cigarette. The monk and Gyatso sat on the sofa, and the 3 of them watched Subai eating. After Subai finished 2 bowls of rice, he put down his extra money and stretched gently. I'm done eating. Immediately, Subai first told what he had experienced before, then took the cigarette handed over by the fat man and lit it. Amitba, so, is this what you mean? The monk said while pinching the beads in his hand, broadcasting, in fact, you have already known her identity through your perspective. Subai smiled and pointed at himself, even I can feel her true identity. Do you think the broadcaster can know? His. The fat man took a breath, then stuck out his tongue and licked his lips quickly, then slapped his thigh. Damn, awesome, this is the real awesome, Dabai, bloody compared with your mother, the corpse is simply weak, okay, just like the comparison between the Iraqi Air Force and the US Air Force. I think back then, the blood corpse scared the rest of us so much that we didn't even dare to stay in Xi'an and ran away, but what was the radio's attitude toward him? When the fat man just said the word Yezi, the broadcaster immediately confirmed the identity of the blood corpse and then pulled the blood corpse into the story world and went crazy. In the end, the broadcaster still acted like a bad cabbage. Also based on the principle of waste utilization, a story world of blood corpses is specially designed to allow other listeners to obtain the inheritance of blood corpses. Nima, think about it now, right? The corpse was pressed directly on the ground and rubbed on the ground, and it was the kind of rubbing back and forth. Oh, when I thought of the level of blood corpse, it was a weak chicken compared with Dabi's mother. Life is so sad. The fat man sighed as he spoke. Gyatso rolled his eyes at the fat man and said directly, "Fat man, let me correct you. Even now, we can only tremble in fear when facing the blood corpse. In the last story world, Dabi faced the blood caused by the broadcast. When the corpse was dead, if Subai hadn't caught the bug rule of broadcasting for 3 hours, there would have been nothing Subai could do when facing the bloody corpse. Thank you for commending me, Subai replied to Gyatso, saying that there is nothing you can do when facing a bloody corpse. You simply have no capital to fight. Then, Subai looked at the fat man and said, "Next time, you can treat that woman differently. What's the name?" Ha ha ha, sorry, the fat man came over and hugged Subai, but Subai pushed him away. The current situation is that the broadcaster knows that she is back, but there is nothing he can do about her. The monk pondered this point. There should still be a lot of restrictions, Gyatso said. For example, this time we were trapped there separately. All the arrangements and techniques were actually made by the Gen Subai. That woman, the whole process was just a bystander, did not personally enter the water to take action, so this should be her limit. Subai shook his head. No, she is not a bystander, she is the planner. In other words, from her perspective at that time, her so-called real son and I were actually her two experimental subjects. She was like it's the scholar who stands outside the glass window watching the experimental process, taking notes while observing. Then what is her purpose for doing this? Fatty asked doubtfully. Let's feel the stones while crossing the road, the monk sighed. She should also be testing the rules and bottom line of broadcasting. She is even looking for bugs in broadcasting. Moreover, one thing that the poor monk can conclude is that she has mastered how to avoid being tracked by the radio, or to make the radio lose the ability to control her like it controls other listeners. It was precisely because of this foundation that she began to do further research, looking for bugs in the radio, and then. The monk didn't say what happened next, but everyone knew what it was. Fatty suddenly said in surprise, we seem to have forgotten a question. Dabai, since judging from those two photos, you are a ghost, and since you are not their biological son. And you? What's the origin? Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao. Chapter 616. Since you are not their biological son, then where are you from? Facing the fat man's inquiry, Subai just shook the cigarette ashes gently, as if he didn't care, as if he was asking himself what the weather was like. Didn't I say that I was probably born by a surrogate? Then you also have. The fat man hesitated. I don't care who is my father and who is my mother, and I don't want to find out, and play another drama about Agarwood saving my mother. Subai smiled. Are you bored? But, Dabai, you are very thoughtful. The monk knew clearly that Subai was too lazy to cause any trouble, and he was too lazy to cause any more trouble to himself. It must be very difficult to find your biological parents or find your own identity. After all, the matter handled by a man and a woman will not leave you any flaws. It will definitely wipe away all traces, but if it is true, being determined to find it does not mean that there is no hope at all, but most people will basically choose to have an attitude of looking for it. But when Subai arrived, he was too lazy to look for it, and he was too lazy to investigate. Haha, it's best if they die, clean and tidy. Subai put out the cigarette butt in the ashtray and continued, I'm like this now, can I really find the woman who will be my surrogate mother? Come out to be a mother? Yes, the fat man nodded. Gyatso stood up and walked into the kitchen. When he came out, he had 4 cans of beer in his hands, and each of them shared 1 bottle. After drinking this cup, it's time to sleep and eat, Gyatso said. My Lord Buddha, are you really not good at expressing emotions? Subai helplessly stood up with a beer, and the others also stood up. The four people clinked their glasses and took a sip. Immediately, the fat man sat down on the sofa with a beer and watched TV with the little guy, while Gyatso went back to his room. At this time, the monk suddenly said, by the way, the poor monk may go to Yunnan in 2 days. Since it is not long since the last story world, he should be able to stay in the real world for a longer period of time. I plan to go to Yunnan to do something issues. Where to go to Yunnan? Dolly, I have an eminent monk in the real world I know who contacted me a month ago and told me that something happened there, and I plan to go take care of it. Haha, then monk, you have to bring a nun back. The fat man sat on the sofa and joked, because Dolly is also a famous place for romance and romance. The monk simply ignored the fat man's immorality. It's good. It's time to relax. At this time, Subai happened to see the little guy who was intently watching the animation on TV. He pursed his lips and frowned slightly, because Subai suddenly realized that he seemed to have pulled the little guy away from him. Since the story world was brought out, it seems that I have never taken the little one out to play. First he lived in his own villa, then in his own detective agency, and then at Lao Fang's house. As a cat, Jixiang often went out for a walk when Subai or Fatty were accompanying the little one. Get some air or something, but the little one seems to basically be able to stay at home, watch TV, read picture albums, has no friends, and rarely leaves the house. Let's do this, monk. Subai licked his lips, hesitated, and then said, let's go together. I'll take my son on a trip too. Let's go together then. You can do your business, and I'll find a baby bike and take him on a ride around the Urhai lake. As soon as Subai said these words, the monk had not yet reacted. As a result, the fat man became anxious first and said, Dabai, didn't you promise to help Ji Zhen do that? People have been urging him for a long time. If you, fat man, want to try to smooth things over, go ahead and try to smooth things over. He has a relationship with his boss, but what does it have to do with that senior audience? I don't really want to get into this muddy water in the first place, even if you just dodge it this time. The fat man said with a bitter look on his face, but I have already accepted her. Then you can figure it out yourself. With you, Fatty, the formation master here, it won't be difficult for him to find a few helpers to replace me. This time, I just want to travel quietly and relax. Relax. Okay, you can take your son to Xiaoyao. The fat man was like a deflated rubber ball, and he said, then I can only ask Xie Zhen to go to the forum to find someone else. By the way, Fatty, there is something else I want to tell you. What's going on? Lend me 50,000 yuan. You know, since the detective agency closed down, my money is really tight. Fatty. Dolly Airport is a very small airport, not as grand as the airports in other big cities, but this small size actually contains a kind of simplicity of Dolly. After getting off the plane, walk a few steps forward and you will arrive at the exit. There is a big slogan hanging on the wall, which is the instruction given by the top leader when he came here a while ago, we must protect Urhai Lake. Opposite the exit is an open-air parking lot, which makes Subai feel very comfortable. After all, sometimes big airports are also inconvenient. After getting off the plane, you may have to walk a long way to find the parking lot. Jixiang squatted at Subai's feet, the little guy was held in Subai's left hand, and the monk stood on Subai's left side. Then let's separate like this, Subai said. Amitba, you just have fun, the poor monk will go do some work first. While the monk was talking to Subai, he reached out and gently touched the little guy's childish head. After spending so long together, the monk is also very fond of the little guy, and the little guy has been blessed by both the monk and Gyatso, and is basically equivalent to their godson. Subai reached out and waved, and a driver soliciting customers took the initiative to help Subai pick up the suitcase. The distance from the airport to the real scenic spot is not very far. If there is no traffic jam, it will take about half an hour. If there is a traffic jam, the time will be longer. Come on, don't move. As soon as he got in the car, Subai took out sunscreen and applied it to the little guy. The little guy didn't seem to like applying these things to his face, but Subai applied it to him just to be on the safe side. Although the little guy is a soul boy, he was often kicked out of bed by Subai when we first met him, and he was thrown into a water tank by Subai on the first day after he was born. But at that time, he didn't feel bad at all. Now he really takes it as his own. When you raise a son, you naturally have to be more careful. If the little guy gets sunburned after playing around, that would be bad. Jixiang was lying on the seat, looking a little listless. Jixiang didn't seem to care much about traveling. Subai remembered that he took Jixiang with him when he went to Josegu last time, but Jixiang had no interest. The driver was a bi-ethnic minority, and he was very enthusiastic. Seeing that Subai was out playing with his children, he took the initiative to chat and took stock of the old and new scenic spots in Dali worth visiting. In Dali, the bi-ethnic group accounts for the majority of the population, and the full name of Dali Bi-Autonomous Prefecture speaks volumes. Chinese people's understanding of Dali actually comes from Jin Yang's novel The 8 Parts of the Dragon and Dali Duan's 6 Meridians Divine Sword. Historically, the Duan family's country of Dali had a history of 500 years, and was then destroyed by the Mongols. Later, during the Ming dynasty, the Ming army also came here. Since then, both Dali and the local residents of Dali have basically begun to follow the Chinese civilization. With the beginning of integration, coupled with the relatively peaceful temperament of the Bai people, there are natural reasons why this place has become a tourist attraction. Chinese and foreign tourists are basically treated warmly when they come here. The road at Kayakan Pier is under construction, so we may have to take a detour, the driver said to Subai apologetically. It's okay, just watch and leave. Is this your first time in Dali? The driver asked. No, Subai replied. Kayakan Pier is a relatively famous scenic spot. Subai also stayed here when he came to Dali last time. It is close to the Urhai Lake and it is quite convenient to breathe fresh air every day and watch the sun rise. However, there are very few B/U0026BS and inns in the Kayakan area opened by Dali locals. Most of them are developed by outsiders, and most of the restaurants there are also like this. Brother, we came at the right time. It's the off-season now. In a month or two, there will be more people. The driver took the initiative to hand Subai a cigarette. Subai took the cigarette and shook it in his hand. There are so many people during the Chinese New Year. All hotels and B/U0026BS in the city are full. Many people traveling by car can only sleep in their cars. Haha, the business of small three-wheelers is the best at that time because cars are jammed on the road. No. Subai hugged the little guy and let him lie by the car window and looked at the blue sky and Urhai Lake outside. He also replied, I remember when I first came here, there were not many people visiting Dali. I still remember, at that time, only the poor people in Dali lived by Urhai Lake. Subai began to recall the scenes of his childhood. Yeah, who knows, in the past, people with no money lived by Urhai Lake, and rich people were not happy to live there, because every time the water rose, the water from Urhai Lake poured into the house easily. Ha ha ha, if you have a house by Urhai Lake now, it will be a hen that lays golden eggs. It's just like a room in a school district, Subai said with a smile. Ha, it's really just like a room in a school district. After about 5 minutes, the driver stopped the car and said, Brother, the Kayakan Pier is just ahead. Subai paid the bill, got out of the car with the little guy in his arms, and walked north from Kayakan Pier. There was a row of exquisite B/U0026BS located next to Urhai Lake. Blue sky, white clouds, green mountains, and high lake. It's beautiful as a painting. Subai sighed while hugging the little guy. After hearing these words, Jixiang on the side stretched out his paw and rubbed Subai's shoes, as if gently patting Subai's shoulder to comfort him, because he knew that Subai's words were as beautiful as a painting. Same means. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 617. The inn that Subai booked online was right next to Kayakan Pier. It took less than 200 meters to reach the entrance of the inn. The name of the inn was Wanghai Pavilion No. 1. The owner was a Korean and the wife of the owner was a northeastern woman. When Subai walked into the inn with the little guy in his arms, he saw a man and a woman cleaning. The man was pushing a vacuum cleaner and the woman was cleaning with a rag. They looked very busy. Did you make a reservation online? The woman put the rag to the faucet and rinsed her hands, then came over and said to Subai. Yes, I ordered it online. Okay, please come with me. Under the leadership of the woman, Subai walked to the innermost living room. The woman took Subai's ID card from Subai's hand and started to register online. It turned out that this woman was the boss's wife. You, the boss lady, have worked hard. Hey, there's nothing I can do about it. The purpose of building a B/U0026B is to build a reputation. If you ask others to do things, you will definitely be perfunctory. You won't even bother to change the quilt. My guests here are introduced to friends by old guests, so I have to work harder on my own. Once the reputation is ruined, there is nothing you can do. Hee hee. Subai took the room card. The landlady walked to Subai and took the initiative to help Subai pick up the luggage bag. Come on, the room you booked is on the 3rd floor. Because he was holding the little guy in his left hand, Subai did not refuse and followed the female boss to the 3rd floor. He helped Subai put down his things and said that if he needed anything, he would come down to see her before leaving. Subai booked a large bedroom with double-sided floor-to-ceiling windows, which meant that the walls on both sides of the room were covered with floor-to-ceiling windows. When the curtains were opened, one could see the high lake diagonally. 4B/U0026BS and inns by the high lake, every room that can see the sea, even if the furnishings and decorations are exactly the same, but if you only look at a little bit of the high lake, the price can directly double, so rely on the B/U0026BS and inns by the high lake. They are all separated side by side. Basically, every B/U0026B inn strives to have a part of it facing the high lake, and those rooms can be labeled as sea view rooms. It's just that the inn on the Kayakan Pier side is separated from the high lake by a small road, which makes me regret that I can't enjoy the feeling of sitting on the balcony with the high lake below, and the high lake facing the Kayakan Pier happens to be the relatively narrow position is indeed not as comfortable as the view of high lake from the double corridor. Haha, is it hot? There are floor-to-ceiling windows on both sides. Even if the curtains are drawn, the strong ultraviolet rays will make the place very hot. Although it is not as good as the sauna, it is not much different. The temperature difference between day and night is relatively large here in Delhi. Basically, the temperature is the highest throughout the day from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Subai saw that the little guy's face was bright red, and he immediately smiled and stretched out his hand. Scratched the little guy's nose. Is it hot? The little guy pouted and climbed onto the bed to find the remote control. Because this was a Korean tatami bed, the bed was not high. The little guy pushed his two tender legs down and climbed onto the bed. Subai directly lifted the little guy's collar and pulled him up just as he was about to touch the remote control on the bed. You brat, you watch TV all day long. You can't watch it at home. The little guy seemed a little unhappy, but he still hugged Subai's neck with both hands and said, Okay, I'll listen to you. Subai couldn't help laughing. Go out to eat first. Subai hugged the little guy and was about to leave the room, while Jixiang lazily crouched in front of the floor-to-ceiling window and basked in the sun. It had never been interested in human food. Now that Subai wanted to take the little guy to eat and hang out, Jixiang also he didn't bother to follow him. With Subai's current strength, unless a high-level audience suddenly attacked him, Subai could basically move forward and retreat freely. Moreover, Kayakan was such a big place. If anything happened, children can also be confident that they can sense it immediately. There was a table at the exit of the first floor of the inn, with several sun hats placed on it. Subai picked a small one for the little guy and put it on his head. Subai didn't wear one himself. The father and son walked along the Urhai Lake for less than 10 minutes and arrived at the commercial street outside the parking lot of Kayakan Wharf. It is said to be a commercial street, but in fact it is very rough and simple. There are only some restaurants, supermarkets, and small roads. There was only enough space for 2 cars to pass each other, and there were car rental shops on both sides of the road. There were full lines of battery cars, bicycles and motorcycles, and there were actually several horse-drawn carriages. The little guy was very interested in horses and couldn't help but reach out and touch them. "Would you like to take a carriage?" The carriage owner immediately came up to solicit business. When the little guy put his hand on the horse's head, the horse actually closed his eyes and actively turned his body slightly to let his head rub against the little guy's body. All things have spirits, and horses are actually a species that is no less spiritual than foxes and dogs. The carriage owner was still in a daze. He had never seen his horse like this before, and it was not even so flattering and affectionate towards him. Looking at the time, it was just noon. Subai also fed the little guy some food on the plane, so the little guy shouldn't be very hungry now. "Sit down." Subai hugged the little guy and got into the carriage. "Should we go to the ancient city or Chongsheng temple?" "Just take a walk, and then you can estimate how much you'll charge." Although the money was borrowed from Fatty, Subai still had the habit of spending money lavishly. Indeed, for him, money actually didn't mean much anymore. The carriage started running at a very slow speed, and cars kept passing by, but riding in the carriage was just to experience that feeling. On one side of Kayakan is Kangshan Mountain, and on the other side across the Urhai Lake is Yugan Mountain. The 2 mountains wrap it up, and coupled with the clear and gorgeous Urhai Lake, this feeling, to be honest, even Subai himself feels a little bit intoxicated. I haven't felt so relaxed in a long time. Holding your son in your arms, sitting on a pony carriage, blowing in the wind, walking aimlessly, without purpose, is sometimes the most difficult thing. Subai seemed to be immersed in this atmosphere, and the little guy just pressed against Subai's chest, staring at the scenery outside the carriage with a pair of clear eyes. About half an hour later, Subai shouted to the coachman that it was okay. The coachman stopped the horse, and when he settled the bill with Subai, he didn't ask for much money, which surprised Subai. In front, there is a coffee shop open in the fields, with lavender planted in front. After walking in, Subai ordered a cup of coffee and a lot of desserts for the little guy. He was about to be able to eat the daily limited desserts at home. The little guy looked very excited. He sat upright and clenched his little meaty hands slightly, looking very excited. Apparently, he heard that his daddy had just made a lot of them. "The name of the dessert, this time, is to make yourself eat enough. I only know how to eat, but I haven't learned to walk yet. I always have good food, drink, and nutritious food, and I don't even grow taller." At this time, the first snack came, and the little guy grabbed it with his hands and ate it without Subai stopping him. In fact, one thing has always been strange to Subai. The little guy doesn't seem to grow up at all. When he was first born, the little guy was actually 7 or 8 months old as an ordinary baby. However, it was not long before Subai took him out of the story world. It has been more than a year, and he is still like this. He is not growing tall, and even he can't even walk very far. If the little guy didn't have a very high IQ and knew that he was a spiritual boy, it would have been a long time ago for an ordinary parent. I hurriedly took my child to the hospital for growth hormone injection to see if there was any congenital disease. However, from Subai's point of view, if the little guy could stay so young and watch cartoons, TV, and play with building blocks every day, he would be able to gain his own happiness. If he could continue like this without any worries, it would seem to be a kind of happiness. Because Subai knew that his son was actually much smarter and more sensitive than others sometimes. The little guy had a great time eating, lots of desserts and ice cream, eating and eating. Subai lit a cigarette, crossed his legs, and looked at the sea of flowers outside the coffee house. Sunshine, afternoon. Very nice. Sir, do you want to take a photo? A young man with a camera in his hand walked up to Subai and asked. Subai looked at the little guy with cream on his face and hands, and couldn't help laughing. He stood up and picked up the little guy from the chair. The little guy's little hand pointed at the unfinished pastries and ice cream on the table. It's all yours, it's all yours. Go out and take a photo with Dad first. The little guy stopped making trouble and started sucking his fingers, and then rubbed his cat face on Subai's clothes. He obviously knew that a photo was going to be taken, so he had to pay attention to his image. Sir, you go a little further to the right. Yes, it's best to squat down and let your son lean in front of you. This young photographer is so professional that in order to pursue the angle, he actually lay on the ground with most of his body, capturing what he thought was the best angle of view and light and shadow in this way. Okay, smile, and the baby will smile too. The little guy cooperated very well, grinning with his little white teeth exposed, and the corners of Subai's mouth naturally showed a smile. Click. The shutter sounds, and a photo is completed. When the shutter clicked, Subai couldn't help but think of the two photos of his life experience. In those two yellowed photos, everyone in them was very natural, but with a cold and dead silence. And the painting style of this photo of mine is completely different from theirs. Yes. Completely different. When the photo was quickly developed and held in his hand, Subai picked it up and let the little guy admire it with him. Lower your head. Kissed my son on the head. Look, our family photo. Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 618. Because the carriage was winding before, the coffee house was actually not far from Kayakan Pier, the inn where Subai was staying. When he returned, Subai didn't call for a carriage. He held the little guy in one hand, father and son. Just walk back slowly as if you were taking a walk. The weather in Delhi also changes at a moment's notice. It often appears in front of you, with the bright sun shining in the blue sky and clear water. But when you turn around, it may be a scene of dark clouds rolling down and pressing down on the ground, especially in Kayakan. Against the backdrop of Yugan Mountain and Kangshan Mountain, even if you don't go to Urhai Lake, just sitting on a stone bench and looking at the mountains and clouds is very interesting. Subai once went to Huashan Mountain. Standing on the peak of Huashan Mountain, looking around, he felt like he was in a fairyland with a vast sea of clouds. It was then that he suddenly discovered that the scenery on the New Year's calendar when he was a child was actually real. At this time, with Kangshan Mountain or with the Jade Table Mountain as a backdrop, one behind the other, completely different painting styles, one is still fresh, while the other is majestic with thick ink and heavy colors. Of course, it is difficult for tourists who rush here and there to catch the scenic spots to appreciate this feeling. How's it going? Does it look good? Subai pointed to the mountain scenery over there and said to the little guy. The little guy smacked his mouth and shouted "Oh oh oh" a few times, as if he was echoing his father's words. But this kind of agreement is more like, just be happy. Also, the little guy came out of the demon cave and climbed down the cliff alone to enter the demon cave. Naturally, he has a lot of experience. Of course, on the other hand, it is indeed very unrealistic for a child to understand the feelings in natural scenery. They prefer ice cream to mountains and rivers. It tastes better. After walking for about 20 minutes, Kayakan Pier was in sight again, and a middle-aged man happened to ride over on a battery car. Going back. This man is the younger brother of the proprietress of the inn where Sudbai lives. He is from Harbin. He is polite and cheerful, and he also has a northeastern flavor when he speaks. Yes, Sudbai smiled and nodded. I'm going to buy some brown sugar. How about you? I'll bring you the authentic ones, which are different from the ones sold in the stores. Those stores are all fooling people. Okay, then bring some. Okay, see you later. The man rode away on a battery scooter. Sudbai hugged the little guy and ordered some local specialty snacks from a roadside stall. Sudbai tasted quite delicious, but the little guy didn't like it very much. That's right, the soil and water cultivate the taste, and the little guy is not picky about food. Probably because I ate too many pastries and ice cream before. While eating, Sudbai noticed that his phone rang. There were very few apps on Sudbai's phone. The one he used most often was just a WeChat ID. When he clicked on it, he found that it was a group message. Recently, the relationship between China and South Korea has been tense due to weapons deployment. This kind of passionate slogans and jokes calling on Chinese people to refuse to buy Korean products and boycott Lottie are very common now, just like the popular QQ space talk in the past. However, Sudbai felt that the WeChat ID that sent this message to himself was very unfamiliar. After thinking for a while, he remembered that this was the WeChat ID of the inn proprietress. When he checked in before, Sudbai didn't have enough cash on him, so he just added it. Transferred via WeChat. For a moment, Sudbai didn't know what to say. The proprietress was from Harbin, and her husband was Korean. She was still sending this message to the group. In fact, Sudbai thought with some wickedness, did the Korean husband know that his wife was sending this WeChat message to a group? After thinking about it, Sudbai smiled again. This is probably life. It is full of contradictions, but it also has its own persistence and bottom line. When Sudbai returned to the inn in the evening with the little one in his arms, he happened to see the landlady checking in for a group of new guests. She seemed to be missing something, so she called out to her husband, who was helping the guests carry it in the back. In a few words, the boss lady can speak Korean, while the husband only knows some simple Chinese. Therefore, Sudbai didn't understand what the landlady said, but the oppa at the beginning gave people a strange feeling. Generally speaking, Korean dramas have been very popular in the past few years, and this word has almost become an internet buzzword. Just hearing this title in reality still makes people feel a little strange. After returning to the room, the little guy wanted to watch TV, so Sudbai turned on the TV for him and asked him to sit on the bed and watch it alone. He walked out of the room and went straight to the roof, where tables and chairs were placed for convenience. Guests go to the roof to watch the sea. I lit a cigarette and sat down on a chair. It was evening, the sky was getting dark, and the wind was getting stronger. It should rain tonight. Sudbai blew out a smoke ring, shook the ashes, and gently twisted his neck. It was really strange for a busy and nervous person to suddenly relax like this. There were many tourists at Urhai Lake, and there was basically an endless stream of tourists leaving and coming with suitcases. At this time, a young man pushing a suitcase caught Sudbai's attention. Because when the other party came into his sight, Sudbai noticed that the golden retriever dog following the other party was exuding a slight energy fluctuation. That is definitely not a golden retriever, it can almost be called a demon. A person traveling with a demon seems a bit strange when he thinks about it. But then he thought about it, and Sudbai suddenly remembered that he seemed to be like this too, and compared with the black cat next to him, the demon next to him felt like a small tractor meeting a big run. Meow. A cat meow came from below and slowly spread out. This meow could not be heard by ordinary people's ears. Before, whether Jixiang followed him on a plane or entered an inn, ordinary people around him also he couldn't see its existence, and with Jixiang's cold and cold temperament, he didn't bother to talk to the ordinary people around him. But since it is auspicious to be here at this time, even if it is just lying lazily on the bed, then this is its territory. Now that another demon has entered its territory, it naturally has to declare its sovereignty. The relationship between people sometimes seems very complicated, while the relationship between demons may seem simpler and more direct. The golden retriever seemed to be irritated at this moment. He immediately knelt down and let out a low bark in the direction of Sudbai's inn. The young owner of the other party immediately bent down, caressing and comforting him while also looking here. Naturally, he also noticed the man who was as young as himself standing on the roof. "Edward, do you sense a threat?" The young man stood up slowly. He could feel that the man on the roof was also watching him. Snapped. The window of Sudbai's room was pushed open. Jixiang stood by the window, and beside Jixiang, the little guy also curiously crawled over and looked outside together. Jixiang was very angry because the dog didn't leave even after he released his breath, but chose to stay where he was. This was a kind of blasphemy against His Majesty. In the eyes of dogs, there are only cats, but in the eyes of people, they are still humans. Woof! Edward yelled immediately, and his body turned into a yellow light and shot directly towards the second-floor window. The two monsters refused to give in to each other at this time, and Edward, who was aware of his own fear, wanted to show his fear to his master. With his own courage, he took an extremely proactive offensive stance. Because in Edward's view, his master is here by his side, so even if he faces higher-level monsters, he has nothing to fear. When beating a dog, it depends on the owner. Sudbai, who was standing on the roof of the building, saw the dog rushing towards the window on the third floor below. He immediately took a step forward and landed, intending to beat the dead dog out because it was in that room. There was also his own son inside, and Sudbai didn't want this dog, which was obviously a bit strong on the outside but was strong on the inside, to scare the little guy. However, when Sudbai took that step, the young man standing below formed a seal with his hands, and a powerful energy was directly locked on Sudbai. Meow. Jixiang made a high-pitched sound. Obviously, the dog's proactive attack had completely angered Jixiang. At the same time, this was also a signal to Sudbai that Jixiang could definitely deal with the undead dog. The matter between cats and dogs is naturally left to the cats and dogs to resolve themselves. Jixiang does not consider himself Sudbai's pet in his heart, and naturally does not have the same sense of dependence on his owner as the golden retriever dog. Sudbai was still very confident in Jixiang. At that moment, Sudbai's figure stagnated in the air for an instant, and then turned directly into a blood mist. In an instant, it floated in front of the young man, and immediately condensed his own. The distance between the two sides was less than half a meter. The young man pointed at Sudbai with all his strength, his eyes calm. Obviously, he had no fear when facing Sudbai. However, he still said with a smile on his lips, "Friend, you actually wanted to interfere in the matter between monsters and beasts just now. Isn't that good?" Facing the other party's question, Sudbai smiled and said, "I also want to ask you a question." "Ask," the young man replied, but even between the question and the answer, the chi of the two men was in violent collision all the time. Snapped. A black light and a yellow light collided together, and then fell together. Immediately afterwards, Jixiang stepped on the body of the golden retriever dog and was combing his own hair. The golden retriever dog's head had been smashed by Jixiang's paw, and it was immediately dead. This scene naturally fell into the eyes of Sudbai and the young man not far away. Sudbai paused and continued to ask, "Do you like eating dog meat?"